Hi everyone, welcome to Mumsuk Code. This is not a video guide session, but the overview of what our C Sharp learning path is going to be. So that's the agenda for this particular video. What we are trying to do is basically learn about C Sharp along with a live project. So what is this live project going to entail? So we're going to talk about CRUD operation. What are these CRUD operations? It's going to be create, read, update, and delete. So all the first letters are, CRUD, CRUD operations. So here what we are saying is we will be working on a particular entity or a particular model. So it can be of anything of your choice. So we do have different flavors here. So book can be an entity, person can be an entity. What else? Any other examples, team, that you could think of? What are the other examples of an entity could be for the C Sharp learning path?
Library.
Yeah, so there are a lot more examples of entities that you can work on. So the aim here is to learn C Sharp as we go along by building the CRUD operations for the chosen entity. And while we are developing this particular application in the C Sharp, we will be following certain practices. So we're going to follow the standard, which is one of the recommended way of developing software. The other thing is test-driven development and pair programming and whatnot, right? So we will be looking into detail on what that is going to look like. So the first aspect that we're going to do is start with the console application. So that's the type of application that we are going to work on. That's going to be our console app. Yeah, let me put it across. So CRUD operations for the chosen entity. So these are the two things that's going to drive our C Sharp track, right? So first you build up your console application, which is going to be your functioning app for this particular learning path. Then what do we have? We come up with our build. So this is going to be our build. What is this build being helpful here? So whenever you are committing your code to GitHub, this code has to be in a clean state. So it should not have any errors, right? In our Visual Studio, we'll be able to build a solution. But in the GitHub repository, whenever there is a pull request or a merge activity, whatnot, so you are going to configure on how this build is going to happen. So that's the second activity that we will be doing. So the first activity is initialize. Let me call this one out here. Maybe a sequence diagram can help, right? So for now, I'm saying initialize console application. And then your next task is about setup build. And then what we are trying to do is go with our unit test project. As I said earlier, we are going to do development in a test-driven approach. So we need our unit test project. So these are the three foundational work that we would like to, set it up before we start our actual coding. These are kind of three entities itself, right? So in our system. So once we have the foundation set up, then we are going to start with our actual coding piece. What we're doing to do here is build from right to left, so back to front, right? Let's assume that our starting uh, you know, factor is the user who's interacting with our system. And the end factor is a storage where we store the data. So let's say for the example here, we are going to choose book. So if the user is interacting with your console application, let me call this one here. That is going to interact with the console application. This being your software is going to perform actions to save the book data in the storage, right? So this is your starting point. That's the entry point. This is your end state of, persisting the data. So what we are going to do is build from right to left. So the first thing that we are going to have that is going to interact with our storage is our storage broker. So we're just double clicking our software and seeing what are the activities that we are trying to do here. So first is the storage broker where we say, okay, now I'm going to add this whole thing. Let's assume that we're going to do create workflow, right? So right now we are working on a create workflow. So that's the first CRUD operation. So for that, we are saying storage broker. That will be our insert to save the data. After that, what are we going to do next is build our foundations. So what is this foundation going to do? Perform all our system validations telling, okay, for me to save the book data by calling the storage broker, I need certain set of valid inputs. So the book should have a title, the book should have an author, release date. So these are all my software requirements. So that's all getting validated in the foundation layer. Okay, so in case of wrong data, invalid data, how the system is going to behave. So in that case, we are going to be introduced with logging broker. So this logging broker is also going to help us in terms of validation. So is this data that is coming in is valid or not? If it is not valid, then we log it so we can refer it back. So now we are being introduced with logging broker. Then we perform all our validations test. Then we enter into our exceptions layer where we say, okay, what if the connection is not, successfully established with the storage? So these are our exceptions. So we complete that. After that, what we do is our exposer. So now this exposer is going to connect here. Maybe I will move this a little bit closer, and this particular user is going to interact with this exposer. So we are building from right to left, and we complete our software for the operation of create. So this whole pieces, all the pieces together completes the create workflow. And the same approach, we will be, going with our storage broker. Since we have initialized the storage broker, we will just define a method for reading. So then we'll start, once create is done, let me, we have this utility set up here, right? And we do have our user set up here. So once this storage broker is there, now we come and say read method. So we define the code, we write the code on what the read should do. Then what do we do? Sorry. So for the same foundation layer, so this becomes, let me say, this is initialization, and then you go with insert, right? And then in the foundations, you say add, and in the exposure, you can call it as post. Since we just following the API standard if it's post. Then you come with this is called get. We do get all as retrieve all, and then the foundation layer is retrieve all. So this one interacts with this to perform the happy path scenario. And then we again connect with our logging broker in case of validations and failure. And then we end up with our exposure for our get calls. So this is how the system is getting built. And now we are going to perform read. So the same activity, we are going to repeat it for update and delete. Once we complete that, we are reaching the end of C# learning path, where we understood what is the basics as we are building the capability for the entity that is chosen for us. So here, once we understand all this, we'll be moving on to the end-to-end product development, where the foundations of storage, broker, logging broker, foundations, expo will be similar, but the exposure layer is going to change because we'll be working on our API project, and we'll be working on our full-fledged build project, unit test, so on and so forth. So this is how our C# learning path is going to get shaped, and follow along in the rest of the videos for step-by-step to complete the learning journey. Thank you all for watching.